Good afternoon, everyone. This is your weekly program, The Law and You, with myself, your host, Shellon Washington. I'm a little bit late today, guys. I'm usually on at 4 p.m. every Saturday, but this Saturday, there were some technical issues that kept me from getting here live on time. But anyway, I'm here today, and I have an interesting issue we're going to be discussing today. I know that inflation is an issue that is affecting everyone right now. It's affecting you, whether you're living in New York, New Jersey, any state that you're living in right now. Inflation is a big problem. So this afternoon, I'm going to discuss quickly with you some issues regarding landlord and tenant and your mortgage that you currently have with whatever mortgage company you have that with. I'm going to be very brief this afternoon. I'll end exactly at my regular half an hour, so I will not go over, guys, because I'm late. I'm very late this afternoon, but it's good to be here. Share the live. Click on the link. Whatever questions you might have throughout this afternoon series of The Law, and you just click your message, write your message, type your message, your comment, and I will see it, and I'll try my best to respond to it. But just bear in mind today, guys, like I said, I'm discussing landlord and tenant and mortgage foreclosure, mortgage issues, anything that is affecting your rights, your interest in property. If you own a mortgage, you're paying a mortgage, you're defaulting on the mortgage, whatever the situation is, we will be discussing that this afternoon. But let's start quickly first with your interest in if you're a renter this afternoon. For all those people who are renting an apartment, good afternoon. I'm seeing your comments. Good afternoon to you, Carl Fortune. I'm seeing you guys. I know I'm extremely late this afternoon, but thank you guys so much for still joining despite, the weather today is really bad in New York, New Jersey area. If you live in the tri-state area, the weather is pretty bad today. So we had a lot of technical issues getting this program started this afternoon. But anyway, I am here, and we will be discussing, like I said, rental properties, landlord and tenant issues, and mortgage foreclosure, mortgage issue, any issue that you might be having with your property. I don't know. So let's get into it right now. So for those of you who might not be aware, if you're renting a property in the state of New York has different types of rental property. The first one is rent stabilized or rent control apartments. If you're living in either one of those, the law heavily protects you. If you're living in a property that's neither rent stabilized nor rent control, there's not a whole lot of protection there for you. Your protection is limited, but yet the landlords are feeling the effects of what is going on right now in New York. First off, when the COVID hit, there were laws protecting tenants from being evicted, which means that if you're buying a property right now in New York, you might want to rethink your decision. The laws are more favorable to a landlord in New Jersey and in some other states than it is right now in New York. I would advise anybody, if you're a small landlord, let's say you have a little bit of income right now, and you're considering buying an investment property, I would tell you New York is not the place to buy an investment property as a small landlord. New York is now much more favorable to the big landlords, the ones with the rent stabilized or the rent controlled properties. The laws are more favorable to them, and I will get into it to tell you why. It's not that favorable to you if you're a small landlord and you say, hey, I want to get an investment property to bring me in some residual income. I want to go purchase one in New York. I would advise you against that. Here's why I will tell you not to buy in New York. First of all, the law heavily protects a tenant. Previous to 2019, you could have served a 30 days notice and get somebody out of your home quickly. 1, 2, 3. If it was a squatter, it was even easier as long as they didn't develop any of the rights of a tenant. It was so easy, you could have just gotten them out. Starting in September 2019, the state of New York put into place new regulations which say that if you have a tenant in your property for more than a year, you cannot serve a 30 days notice. If the tenant has been there for more than 2 years, you have to serve a 60 days notice. If they've been there for more than 3 years, you have to serve a 90 days notice. Failure to serve these types of notice will cause your petition. And I know a lot of people like to run to the court pro se, and because they don't want to pay an attorney. So a lot of times people say, I want to do this myself. And in a lot of these instances, it's because they cannot find affordable legal service. And that's why I'm here, guys, so that you can now find affordable legal service that fits your need, because very often it's not very affordable, the lawyers that you find out there. And people are searching for affordable legal service. And because they're unable to find it, they end up trying to do, matters pro se, and they end up failing. I can't tell you how many times I've been in court and I've seen cases thrown up, dismissed, because the landlord they weren't sure what they were doing. Once I was in court and I saw a lady's case got thrown out because she failed to serve a 90 days notice. She served instead a 60 days. And you cannot serve 60 days if that tenant has been there longer than 3 years. The law says you must do a 90 days in that situation. So you guys, the landlords listening to this, please pay attention, because I would advise you, if you do have property right now in New York, if you could afford to sell it and leave. New York is not the place for you if you're a small landlord trying to make ends meet. Or if you have a property and you said you want to stay there and find the right tenant, have that tenant properly vetted so that you know that that tenant has sufficient income, or they have a co-debtor, somebody could co-sign for them to make them a strong tenant that you're guaranteed that you're going to pay your rent when the months come. But don't just settle for any tenant, and then when they stop and they default on the payment, that puts you in a precarious situation, especially if you're relying on that rent to pay the mortgage on the property. That's a bad situation to be in, guys. So I would advise small landlords, if you're buying, reconsider. If you already own a property in New York, think about who you're putting in your property very, very carefully, because now the laws in the states in New York are very, very favorable to a tenant. So let me tell you what happened after you file those notices. You serve the notices on the tenant, whether it be a 30 and a 60 or a 90 days. Once those notices are served, the law now says once it's expired, you can go ahead and serve your petition, file your petition and your notice of petition to evict those people. And because of the crowded courts in the state of New York, especially in Kings County, when you file those petitions, if you file it through an attorney, the court is taking a lengthy time. They can take as much as entire 30 days just to issue what is called an index number. For those of you who are familiar with the system, you know that any type of legal action that is initiated in any of the states in this country, what is first purchased is called an index number. Once you get that index number, and I'm saying you wait for more than 2 weeks to get one issued by the Kings County Landlord and Tenant Court. It takes a very long time. Once you get that issued, the next step is they're going to give you a court date. And mind you guys, you are waiting for another 30 days before you can even get to the court. In some instances, 60 days. It just depends on which judge the matter goes before. You wait another 45 days or 45 days, depending on how long they make you wait. So you keep adding the time on there, and then when you finally get the date to go before the judge and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to get my case going, there is a mandatory adjournment. So now they're mandating that all of these cases must be adjourned on the first call. So on the first calendar call is another waste of people's time and energy. And I'm telling you, the system is being geared to favor the big, mighty landlords, like, who controls the state of New York. So I don't want to say, but the system is heavily favored in those people's favor, and it's disfavoring to small landlords who are barely getting by, barely making enough to pay their mortgages and to do whatever they want to do in life. So I would say, if you guys have a chance, the opportunity, sell the property, move to a different state that's more favorable. And I can tell you right now, I know for sure New Jersey is very, very favorable to landlord, and New Jersey is very close to New York in terms of time and proximity. Again, guys, once you get before the court now, you waited the full 45 days for the initial adjournment, then the court is very slothful. Let me give you a favor. And this judge, some of these judges, they need to be reviewed and maybe moved from the bench. Right now, I have a case pending before one of these, a judge in the landlord and tenant court. And I wouldn't name her yet, but I will come back on this show and on different occasion, and I will name her. So this guy had this tenant in his apartment for more than a year. The tenant hasn't been paying, and he's been receiving what is called city Phelps. Guys, if you don't know what is city Phelps or HRA in many instances pay the rent for certain tenants, certain low-income tenants. It's similar like going through NYCHA, because NYCHA provides rental relief, or in some cases, the Section 8, you qualify, you apply for it, you qualify. There is a program that has been killing landlord and tenant in New York. And if you ever accept a tenant from that program, you will be doomed. So you got to really make sure that you vet. Some of the programs will pay 100%, but the 100% is not throughout the entire time that the tenant remains in possession in your property. Some of those programs, it's only good for the time that the tenant is not working. If the tenant works, then they reduce the amount of benefit they pay to you and they increase the amount the tenant is required to pay. But you would think the tenant would pay their portion, but in a lot of instances, the tenant does not pay his or her portion, which means now the landlord doesn't get the full rent, because City Phelps or NYCHA is not going to increase the rental back if the tenant is working. So you got to be careful, vet these people. A lot of times they come to you and they say, I would like to rent. If you don't vet them and make sure that they have a strong credit and they're not the type of person who just run and seek from landlord to landlord. And the thing is, you would not know that there's an eviction or the person's been evicted sometime in their past. And you would go, you will gladly take that tenant in thinking it's guaranteed money, but in some instances it's not. So be very careful about which city program you're getting into and accepting. I mean, Section 8 is the strongest. If you take a Section 8 tenant, you're guaranteed to be paid by NYCHA. They're going to send you a voucher every month and you're going to be fine. But the other programs like City Phelps, you know, HRA gives certain programs that is not very good because it relies heavily on a portion that the tenant has to pay. And once that tenant continues to default, you're going to be your debt that you owe or owe to you, it's going to be continuously increased. So be very careful about that. The small landlords, be careful. Again, like I said, in the case of the big landlords who own 6 or more units, because like I said earlier, it's different for if you're just a 1 or 2 or 3 family property. If you own up to 4 property, 4 apartments in one building, it's still not, it doesn't fall under the rent stabilization law. So you still can do whatever you want in terms of increasing your rent. And one of the mistakes I see make very often with landlords from Caribbean countries, Guyana, they do not increase the rent. They put a tenant in there since 1996, and the tenant has been there all the way to 2019 and still paying the same rent. Now, people, Guyanese, I'm talking to you specifically, or some other West Indian people. When you put tenants in your property, make sure that you do 2 things. Make sure that you update your property very often, like every time you put a tenant out. Ensure you paint the property. Ensure you get the bathroom cleaned up. Ensure you change the appliances every now and then, and ensure you raise the rent. You cannot be renting a property at the same rent for 10 years. You will not gain any particular income on those properties. So always ensure that when you change your tenant, you increase the rent. And I think a lot of people are not aware of this. They're not familiar that you can actually increase your rent. Now, the people who own those rent stabilized or rent control property, it's very different for them. They are controlled, so they cannot increase the rent as a landlord in the same manner a landlord with a 3 or a 4 or 5 family unit can increase. You know, once it's 5 or above, then you fall under the rent stabilization law. So you can't increase it as you desire or as you please. So you have to be careful with that. Now, again, the landlord and tenant process, evicting the tenant is a very, very lengthy process. Now, it used to be within 6 months you can get a tenant out. Now people are taking as long as a year, you know, but not over a year. I have never seen one that take longer than a year. But if you don't have a competent attorney, you may end up staying in court for longer than a year. So you have to be careful with that. And the other issue is the trial dates. The courts are taking forever to assign trial dates for these cases to be disposed of. There's some judges there that needs to be exposed, and I'm going to be coming on this show and exposing some of those judges. They do not need to be seated there because they're not doing the law. They're not executing the law fairly. They're executing it more fairly to some people than others, and it needs to be exposed because there's no other venue that we can go and expose this. You can file complaints about them, but that wouldn't solve the problem as much as if it's exposed to the public is aware, and then when you're faced with the same judge and you're faced with the same type of discrimination, all of us continuously file complaints against some of these people, then they will have to go. The good thing is living in this country is that we have remedies, we have rights, and if a judge is not doing their job, we can file complaints. We can remove them. You elected them and you can have them removed. Or even if they were appointed by the mayor, they can be easily removed if they refuse to do their job in a fair manner. If there's any sign of bias, they can be removed. The other thing is with the landlord and tenant case, the fastest way is getting into an agreement with the tenant and get the tenant to agree to give you a judgment of possession and getting them out. Those are some of the easiest way. But again, don't try to do things on your own. Always consult with an attorney. Even if you say, well, I want to try this for myself, always consult with an attorney. Again, guys, if you're here and you like what you're hearing and the program is helping you and you believe that there's something here that you can use to help your life be a little bit easier, I encourage you to press the like button and share the live. I know last week we had a replay. That's because I was not around to do the show. And then today we had technical issues. But guys, I want to continue this show. I would like to get the ratings up. So I encourage you, tell your friends, tell your family that I'm here every Saturday at 4 p.m. Even if I'm a little bit late, I will be here on Saturdays at 4 p.m. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to take a quick break and then I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about foreclosures because, like I said, as the economy gets worse, as inflation gets worse, one thing is happening right now to a lot of people. The thing that is happening right now is mortgage is going into default. And I don't want your mortgage to go into default. So I'm going to be right back and we're going to talk about how to prevent your property from going into default. I'll be right back, guys. This is attorney Shellon Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100. Hi guys, welcome back to today's program, The Law and You, with yours truly, your host, Shellon Washington. We're going to continue, guys. I said before I took that short commercial break that we're going to talk about how to prevent your property from going into foreclosure. And I know there's a lot of you. I don't want anyone that I know, any of my clients, to go into foreclosure. But unfortunately, because we're living in some unprecedented times where the cost of living is rising, but unfortunately, most people, their income is not going up, but the cost of living is continuously rising. Let's talk about how you can prevent your property from going into foreclosure. Like, one of the things you should always make sure before you even purchase a property is that you have sufficient income coming in that on one person could sustain that property, the mortgage that is owed and due on the property. A lot of times people purchase property that they themselves can't afford. They have to get 2 or 3 people to afford the mortgage. You know, if there's tenants in the property, that makes it a whole lot easier. But if you don't have tenants and you say, okay, let's purchase a one family, it's never a good idea if you know that your income is not strong, first of all, to purchase a one family. It's better to do a 2 or a 3 family. That way you know that at least one of your tenants are going to be paying towards the mortgage. So if you lose income in your household for whatever the reasons might be, you should still be able to use the income that is coming in from the tenants to continue to pay your mortgage. Or worst scenario, if one of the tenants cease to pay their income because they fell on hard time, you must still be able to continuously pay that mortgage. In the instance where you're purchasing a one family and it's a husband and a wife, I always encourage people, make sure either the one spouse, either the husband or the wife, can bear the cost of the mortgage on their own income without the other. The reason for this is if one spouse should lose their income, at least the one who remain working can sustain that income. Those are some of the ways to avoid the possibility of you going into foreclosure. Another way to do it also, if you see, or if you know that it's becoming a strain, if you recognize that your payment is becoming strenuous on you, don't wait until you default. You can contact the bank and tell the bank there's something called a mortgage modification. A lot of people, some people are familiar with it, but some people don't know. You can contact the bank and you could say, listen, we're having a problem. The property is going into, I'm having a problem in terms of being able to keep up with the payment. I'm experiencing some difficulty, some financial loss, or whatever the situation might be. Talk to the bank and tell them you would like to have loss mitigation. Loss mitigation is something that is available through most banks to help homeowners to retain their property. So go ahead and call your bank if you feel like you're being strained, or you can even call my office and we'll help you deal with the situation by contacting your lender and ensuring that you do not go into default. The most important thing is you do not want to go into default, because if you do, then it will be a more difficult task to pull you out of that, versus if you act quickly before it happens and try to find a method to prevent yourself from going into foreclosure. And for those of you who are already in foreclosure, there's a lot of people out there that has been tricked out of their money by a lot of people who said, oh, I can help you. We can help you get out of foreclosure. And in fact, they ended up putting you in a worse situation. They told you that they can modify your mortgage and you've been trying multiple times and you haven't succeeded. Your last ditch method would be a Chapter 13. That's something you really don't want to do. But if you have to, let me tell you, it's not as bad as it sounds, but the courts will help you to get the property modified and they'll bring you back out of that. That's one of the ways that you can prevent or avoid losing your property. You do not want to lose your property, okay? You don't want to lose. I see somebody's asking, Carl Miller is asking how to get rid of a bad tenant. He said getting rid of a bad tenant takes forever. Well, it kind of does. Like I explained earlier, it's a lengthy process. It used to be anywhere between, you could have gotten a tenant out really quick, between 3 to 6 months before COVID. But because of COVID, the state of New York has put certain procedure in place within the court to prevent this from happening. So you got to be careful, vet your tenants. Properly have your tenants vetted, and we do have a service that we subcontract tenant vetting to, and we will vet the tenants for you to ensure that you're taking good people in your property, people who are not going to stop paying your rent and just stay there and live. These are people who are professional renters, and they know how to manipulate the system to try to live for free as long as they can. These people you have to be watchful and very careful of, and vet these people before you take them. Because if you take City Phelps tenants and those tenants were not properly vetted, you're going to find yourself in a very, very tough situation. Once upon a time, it used to be a very good thing to own property in the state of New York. But because of the way the law is changed now, it's not such a great thing to do right now. And I wouldn't encourage you as a small landlord to go invest your money in the state of New York. I've seen a situation where a young lady invested her money. She's young. She's maybe like 26 or 27. She invested in a property for the first time in the state of New York, and she took a property that had a really, really bad tenant, and the tenant took her through hell. And one thing you need to understand is these tenants can make your life a living hell by calling the city on you very often if you have any violations in those properties. This is why you see I advised you earlier to ensure that when a tenant leaves, you do basic upkeep on the property. You paint the walls, you change the carpet if necessary, ensure that the tub is properly clean, or you shampoo the carpet. You don't have to spend a whole lot of money to keep your property up to code. It must be up to code. Otherwise, you're going to be inviting problems on yourself, especially with those City Phelps tenants. Be wary of them. Be careful. I saw one lady, an elderly woman, almost went crazy on a City Phelps tenant. That tenant that she had a dog on the premises. The dog was, wasting in the backyard, on the carpet, and it was a terrible situation for her. She almost felt like unaliving herself because the city was not doing enough to protect that landlord. And this is why I'm warning you, because the city really doesn't care about small landlords. They really care about the big landlords, about protecting them, because what you see is happening right now in New York is gentrification. And your small property, somebody is looking at it and wants it to tear it down and put up a big giant property, 10, 12 stories up. So the city doesn't want to really protect small landlords, because as you look and you see that those smaller buildings are moving, they're getting replaced. You look around you, our office used to be on Nostrand Avenue. That building was sold, and now it's a big property is up there about 10 stories high or whatever, how many floors up. But you got to pay attention to what's happening to make smart and conscious decision, and don't go wasting your money on the wrong property. Okay, guys? I know today I was on a really, really late start. So if anyone else have any questions regarding mortgage foreclosure or evicting your tenant, if I haven't covered it here, and this is just to give you a little bit of education. It's an educational program. It's not meant to give you legal advice, because your situation might be a little bit unique. And if you have a unique situation which requires further analysis, don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call our office. We're available Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. So if you're encountering any legal issue and it's affecting you based on anything you've heard me say here, just don't be afraid. Pick up the phone and call us on Monday morning, 9 a.m. all the way to 5:30 p.m. We're there. Okay, so as I said, I hope I've answered and give you a little bit of information that you might need to help you stay safe and stay on top of your property, your assets, and not lose your assets while you live and work in the state of New York. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I know I was late, like I said, but now I have to go. I know I'm not even over my time, but because I was so late, I have to be a little bit short today. Thank you guys again for watching. Share the link. Click on the like button. Keep this program going. I'm hoping to bring on the program next week. I have a client whose son was killed in Buffalo, and I would like to bring that client here on my program so we can talk about that civil litigation, that civil lawsuit against the Erie County in Buffalo, the state of Buffalo. So I'm going to bring that client next week. So I'm encouraging you next week at 4 o'clock. I'm going to be here on time next Saturday. I'll be bringing that guest with me. Again, this is a personal injuries claim, a wrongful death claim. I'm going to be bringing her live so she can share her story with you, and we can discuss it so that you guys could be aware that if you know someone who have had a similar situation or they're going through something similar, where you can go, how you can get help, and how we can get this sorted out. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm your host, Shellon Washington. And thanks again for being here with me on The Law and You. See you again next week at 4 p.m. sharp. Thank you, guys. Have a good rest of your weekend.